Oh God, Dane.
Hello and welcome to Who Is Best, a show where I look Claudine and take games that give you choices and rate those choices in a You know, a lot of my viewers wonder why I don't make tier lists of video games upon launch. Unicorn Overlord is the perfect example why these compilations take so much time. Vanillaware really outdid themselves with this tactical RPG gem. Systems layered upon systems create one of the most tactically complicated games I have ever played. Now, when rating the different characters and their classes in this title, there is a lot of aspects to consider. You need to first consider base stats, AP and PP, skills, abilities, equipment, and valor skills. But there's also the question of accessibility and versatility. Finally, the most important aspect is synergy within your unit. All of this culminates in a difficult and most likely controversial list of party members available in this title. A few notes. I'll be considering accessibility to the class and not just the unique story unit of that class. I'm focusing in on late to end game, but units' usefulness in the early game will also be considered. Finally, I don't have time to dive into the specifics of every class, so you'll probably notice I've left out a few strategies, but just know that I considered everything, even the things I don't bring up. Now, if you would like to support me in my obsessive research, why don't you subscribe? Oh, and stick around till the end for a bonus list. We'll start with the here. The Vanguard is the worst overall unit in the game. Sure, you start with Lex, but you will bench him almost immediately. Being able to replenish AP isn't as rare as PP and can easily be done in other ways. Even upon promotion, the Vanguard's overall squishiness mixed with its ability to taunt enemies just leaves it nearly useless. The Sword Fighters are useful evasion tanks if you want to pour all your best items into them. But even with the optimal setup, these fast, squishy units fails to be much of anything. They suck at damage, they are terrible at support, and overall end up being benched for the majority of your playthrough. The low tier. Joseph has an exclusive class called the Paladin. Early on, Joseph is your best unit, and will be through most of the Cornea map, but after that, the Paladin falls off completely. So much so that the only reason it didn't land in the tier is because of its absolute broken nature in the opening hours. The Elven Fencer is a single target magic DPS that serves almost a single purpose: tomes. If it wasn't for these broken items, the Elven Fencer would have landed on the tier with the rest of the list so far. Fortunately for the Babe Rylanor, being able to imbue attacks with stun, fire, or most importantly, ice elements can't be ignored. Albin is another early game must that loses steam during the mid game. Pretty much everything the Viking can do, almost every other class can do better. Not to mention that nearly all its utility can easily be replaced with items. The Clerics are a mixed bag. You'll never go wrong with healing, especially if they're in a support unit. But just being able to heal isn't enough to elevate this class beyond the low tier. Better to fill your units with enemy wiping party members and just ignore healing altogether. The Werewolf is a okay damage dealer. There really isn't much to say here. It can do some decent single target damage and ends up being a much lesser form of the Land Note. Its physical self buff is great, and if at night, the Werewolf's bestial buff can make it pretty deadly. The Feather Sword is a mixed bag. If you can acquire Oclise early on by farming Divine Shards, then she'll be one of your best units throughout the Cornea region. As soon as you can promote classes, the Feather Sword loses almost all utility aside from being a flying unit. There is almost nothing else this class can do better than anyone else. The final member of the low tier is Sinatio. The Feather Staff can be recruited as soon as Albion is unlocked, so the fact that Sinatio is the last party member to be recruited doesn't ping him as bad as one would think. That being said, the Feather Staff is a decent flying support that overall just isn't that impressive. Overheal can be cool, but doesn't really push the needle at all. Alright, we're going to split the mid tier up into two sections, so let's start with the lower mid tier. Fotokwa has one very important purpose. The Feather Shield can reflect magic. Seeing as magic can cause some of the highest damage in the game, this can be situationally important, but I must emphasize the situational part of this class. In fact, the entire lower mid tier is made up of situational units, if I'm being honest. The Sergeant has some awesome skills that boost her up on this list. The most notable is the ability to buff critical rate, which works well with a lot of physical classes such as gladiators, lance necks, and the dreadnought. Aside from that though, the Sergeant really doesn't have much more of a purpose. The Werebear is a lesser hoplite mixed with the Warrior. It can both tank attacks and do damage, but doesn't really excel at either. Its major issue is its lack of party coverage. Sure, it can probably survive attacks, but unlike the hoplite, it can't help others survive. The Rogue is going to probably be my most controversial placement. I think the community is split on this class, as many of you either rate it at the top or bottom of the list. I think that objectively the Rogue is a mid-tier class that works well as an evasion tank, especially early on. Situationally, it's a good frontliner, but there are too many better options. The Dreadnought is exclusive to Amalia, and Amalia is exclusively locked behind beating the arena. Now, if she were truly locked behind the arena till the endgame, she'd have landed even further down on this list. But seeing as there are ways to cheese the arena fights with her, unlocking a level 40 single target beast when the rest of your units are half that in levels propels her up this list. Once your units catch up in levels though, she'll land safely in the mid tier. The Werefox is the single best evasion unit in the game, and with the right equipment, it will be nearly impossible to hit. Due to the Werefox having access to spears, you could make it a decent attacker on top of this. Throw in the nighttime buff of the Beastrels and you have a pretty good front row fighter. The Sniper is a lesser Elven Archer with an early game AoE charge attack and pretty much nothing else. Bows are always handy to have around, but all other bow classes are better. This mainly boils down to utility. Speaking of bow classes, next up on the lower mid tier is the Elven Archer. The Elven Archer is boosted slightly above the Sniper due to its versatility. Being able to both attack, support, and heal leaves them with a slight advantage. The final member of the lower mid tier is the Gladiator and Werelion. With support from almost everyone else in the party, a late game Gladiator can be a screen wiper with a devastating AoE attack. The major issue is just how squishy these guys can be. It's nearly impossible to keep them alive long enough to do their damage. They have a useless cover ability that will only kill them, and their AoE is best at full HP, meaning that you'll probably want them in the back row. The Werelion is better than the Gladiator, but only slightly. We're halfway done. Let's move on to the upper mid tier. Scarlet's exclusive class Priestess is pretty much the Bishop with a few notable exceptions. First, she has better stats, and second, she has the ability to inflict magic damage on enemies, leaving her much more useful than the clerics and bishops. Overall, she's a healer worth taking along with you on your journey. The Wereowl is important for many of the best unit setups in the game. Its main purpose is to recharge PP, which is a skill exclusive to this class. Despite the Wereowl's terrible stats and lack of damage, its PP recharge just can't be ignored. I'd recommend pairing this class with the Elven Augur or Elven Sibyl for Elemental Roar. The Arbalest is a fantastic tanking class. Its combination of defense and bow attacks leave it with some of the best range of any class in the game. On top of being a tank, the Arbalest, aside from the Great Knight, is probably the second best tank at damaging and is the third best bow class in Unicorn Overlord. If you could get the Feather Bow early on like you could the Feather Sword, it might have landed in the top to God tier. This class's ability to both inflict status elements, specifically blind, with its support, leave it as one of the better classes in the game. Unfortunately, you'll only use it for the late game, and the Druid is much better at debuffs, leaving it in the mid tier. The Legionnaire is absolutely terrible throughout Elheim. The mixture of flying and magic units leave this class flopping around uselessly on the ground. But aside from that, and some difficulties in Albion, the Legionnaire is one of your best tanking units. Their ability to cover single party members or an entire row allows you to build strategies with squishy units such as the Witch or Elven Augur. The Sainted Knight is one of the best supports in the game. They can block magic attacks, refresh their own PP, do somewhat decent single target damage, and buff other party members. Their stats let them function as a front row party member, and their inability to be debuffed allows them to keep the rest of the team from being locked out of attacking. Overall, they're just awesome units. The Breaker is the best answer to guarding classes such as the Legionnaire or Werebear. Its single target damage can be up there, especially when you take into account their self buff that pops every time an ally is attacked. One of the major issues holding this class back though is its accuracy and the fact that the Landsknecht exists, which is far and away the better class. Alright, that wraps up the mid tier. Let's move on to the top tier. The Landsknecht is the best single target attacker in the entire game. Not only can they dish out the most single target damage in Unicorn Overlord, but the higher the enemy's HP, the higher the damage they can do. Throw on their devastating counters, their insane self buff, and the fact that when you go up against the final boss, the Landsknecht is your best option for dealing with his unique strategy.
Enough is enough! I have had it with these
The Griffin Knight is a mixture of all the best attributes of every unit. They're one of the best flying types with a row clearing attack, self-healing, and an initiative buff for the entire row. Throw on the fact that they have incredible evasion and somewhat decent defensive stats, and the only thing you need to watch out for are archer enemies. Then you have the Wyvern Master. This class paired with the Dragoon Spear is an incredible screen wiper. Sure, their innate skills are mainly relegated to column or single target damage, but being the tankiest flying unit in the game, one which even archers have a hard time taking out, the Wyvern Master ends up being the best flying class in Unicorn Overlord. With the right setup, and I mean the right one, the Dark Knight can be an absolute beast of a unit. Again, with the right setup, they can outdamage any other unit in the game, and there just is no contest. Now, that is contingent on their health being low, so they are at a disadvantage, but despite that, their damage potential just can't be ignored. The Great Knight is one of the best units in Unicorn Overlord. There really isn't anything this class can't do. It can tank almost every attack, minus the Breaker, can cover all allies, can buff the attack of a row, and if paired with other mounted units, can be an overwhelming force of destruction. Sure, they can't hit the damage numbers of the Dark Knight, and its utility is tied with the Griffin and Wyvern units, but the sheer versatility of the Knight will make it a must-have for almost any unit setup. Gilbert's exclusive class, Prince, is what you would call full-on support. He's the antithesis of the Druid. The main draw here is his ability to buff initiative, attack, and defense within only a few turns. The downside is that he sucks at attacking. But seeing as he has decent defensive stats for an infantry unit, as long as you place him in the back row, the rest of your party can focus on damage. Virginia is going to be another controversial placement. I nearly placed the Valkyrie in the God tier, but settled on the top of the top tier. The Valkyrie's tanking capabilities, countering, and single target damage is a deadly combination. Given the right items, she's even more deadly. But other than her defensive buff, the Valkyrie struggles to support a game-breaking endgame unit as her usefulness is almost entirely self-contained. Because of this, she just barely misses the God tier. Aush the Wizard is a lesser witch, but don't let that fool you. The Wizard or Warlock is one of the best units in the game. The main reason for this is its items. The Witch and Wizard have access to the best items in Unicorn Overlord, and because of this, with the right setup, the Wizard can be one of the best units in the game. Its main drawback is the lack of quick cast and its lesser fire element. The final member of the top tier is Eltalinde, the Elven Sibyl. Eltalinde and Rosalinde share the same fairy mechanic, which can be used to perform one of the best screen wiping AoE skills in the game. The problem is that Eltalinde's skills are based around healing and cost much more than the Elven Augurs, meaning that she'll require quite a bit of support before she can be useful. With that being said, her damage output and support can't be ignored. The God tier. First on the God tier is the Druid. The Druid is a devastating debuffer that can single-handedly elevate any unit to God tier. Her ability to completely strip the enemy of strength, defense, and initiative is unmatched. Throw on the fact that she can blind an entire team and you have potentially one of the best characters in the game. The Witch beats out the Wizard as best magic user in Unicorn Overlord. This mainly boils down to two things. First is quick cast, the second is her innate ice element, which is the best status effect in the game. If you throw on double cast with the Trinity Rain boosted by a tomb, you have the second best screen wipe in this title, no questions asked. Berengaria is such a busted unit. I cannot believe the game hands you a Dark Marquis so early in your playthrough. Not only is she the best front row tank in the early to mid game, but she'll continue to be your best front row fighter all the way to the end game as well. Seriously, using Berengaria makes any difficulty easy mode. Rosalinde has Elemental Roar, and unlike her sister, she can buff this nearly unblockable AoE attack within one turn with the right setup. Now, here's the catch. She does require a lot of support to accomplish this. But seeing as Elemental Roar pretty much is an instant win attack if you can manage it, Rosalinde belongs nowhere but the God tier. Elaine. Elaine is well, he's the best unit in the game. He's kind of a mix between the buffs and strengths of the Great Knight, the defensive coverage of the Legionnaire, and road-destroying ability of the Griffin Knight, all rolled into one. But what confirmed this guy's place on the god tier is his exclusive late-game items. He gets the Unicorn Ring and a class-specific sword that makes him invulnerable to status elements and completely fills his AP and PP. Set him in the front row and there's almost nothing that can kill him. The final member of the god tier and top of this list is Unifi. Unifi's unique class is Snow Ranger, and my goodness is she broken. This mainly comes down to her AoE charge attack, Glacial Rain. This thing only costs 2 AP and hits every enemy while also inflicting freeze. What's crazy is that if you enhance her attack with the Lightning Tomb, she'll inflict both freeze and stun on all enemies. Both of these elements stack, meaning that it'll take 2 turns before anyone can attack. If you build a team around her, Unifi pretty much defeats any enemy thrown at you for the entire game. And that's our list. How'd we do? What was your favorite unit combination? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all to my Patreon members, and if you would like to join the Pro tier and receive Patreon benefits, click on the link below. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you all later. Bonus round. Top 10 Unicorn Overlord Babes. Number 10, Sharon. Number 9, Melisandre. Number 8, Berengaria. Number 7, Virginia. Number 6, Rylanor. Number 5, Unifi. Number 4, Rosalinde. Number 3, Scarlet. Number 2, Celeste. And number 1 is Selvi. For the guys, it's obviously the Beefcake Photocua.